So, Frank, could you start by telling us a little bit more about the current landscape of kind of the whole revenue organization and how new technologies and especially AI have, I guess you can say, like changed things up quite a bit recently?
Yeah, so I think we've seen back in last year a lot of tooling out there that was coming out to be sort of a co-pilot, essentially, to a lot of sales reps, whether you're an SDR or an account exec or whatever the other role you have, and essentially helping you to do a better job, essentially, whether that's filing, let's say, notes in your CRM or having call recording notes, after this call or after this even podcast, right? So you can use AI for a lot of different things, and it's in the form of a co-pilot, kind of easing your job, etc. However, this year, what we're going to be seeing more and more, we're going to see autopilot experience. And the autopilot experience is where things happen autonomously either around you, or they're either designed to replace you as if you are a sales rep. And typically, a lot of these tools tackle the bottom performing, essentially, segment of the organization. So typically, I would say, for every 10 people that you hire, one is a natural sales rep. 2 to 3 can be trained up really well. And then about 60%, unfortunately, have to be fired as quickly as possible. The other way to look at it is, you have the A's and B's and the C's in your sales team, and you as a head of sales or even as a CEO of a company, you just want to keep the A players and milk them as much as you can, essentially, right? So give them all the best tooling so they can produce as much as they can, because their conversion rates are amazing, right? They're typically what's called the machines or the stars, or they're just very lucky, or whatever the other reasons are, or very competent as well, right? So not just lucky, but luck naturally also plays along. So if you give these particular reps, right, the A players, an A star tool that helps them to essentially produce more or provide more output, then of course, as an organization, you're going to be producing typically more because you're giving all your leads, let's say, to the best converting rep, and B, you're also going to be significantly more profitable as a company, because what sucks typically the company when it comes from a resource perspective, right, is is um, is essentially spending money on the lowest performing reps, right? That don't typically produce you and don't necessarily move the needle for your company. So you're better off spending more dollars on top performing reps and make them produce more, because either they're hungry, competent, lucky, whatever the reason is, you spend on them significantly more. And every company has typically at least one A player or two that you want to double down. So you want to give the best tooling as well from a co-pilot perspective, or even autopilot perspective. Help that rep maybe to autonomously execute maybe parts of the sales process. So we're going to see a lot more this year autopilot experiences that companies are putting out in the market, and particularly from the startups. And there's a lot of startups that are also coming, let's say, from the US, from the Y Combinator, for example, batches like AI SDR, Artisans, for example. There's one in the UK called 11x.ai. There's one in the Netherlands called Luna.ai. So a lot of companies are trying to go into the realm of providing essentially autonomous sales capabilities in one shape or the other. But all of them are currently focused on sort of driving the top of the funnel, so essentially driving the pipeline for the organizations. So we're going to see an acceleration of that, because it's not anymore growth at all costs. It's about profitable growth. I think a lot of investors and startup founders are waking up after their the golden times, which was a couple of years back. So essentially, companies will try and figure out how they can become essentially leaner and meaner. And this is where a lot of AI capabilities come into play. And this is why I'm super excited also to be working in this field.
Yeah, no, like I can definitely see like a lot of conversations we have as well in terms of like that kind of optimizing the A players, but also, the more people you add, the more complexity you have. So every new person you add to the company, you need to train them, you need to have more managers and more layers. So it's really adding to that kind of organizational kind of complexity as well. And a lot of that friction internally also kind of lost revenue as well. So
Mm.
I can definitely see that a lot of companies are very excited about like this kind of change, but still like very few companies actually do it. Like you see some companies do it, but I would still say from our experience, it's still on even in tech savvy companies on a fairly basic level in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and I observed something similar. So I guess you would argue that in the European landscape, that's definitely more of the case. even more sophisticated markets like let's say Nordics as an example, where people are potentially, or companies are less prone to kind of provisioning, let's say, full-on AI capabilities. And the reason for that is in some markets, people are still heavily geared towards a relationship-based game. That means there has to be a human from the get-go, right at the top of the funnel, all the way down to the bottom of the funnel. So this is why it's harder to potentially replace the human at the top of the funnel in these particular markets. And there's other markets also in Europe where this is more of a thing. But the more you go into what I call more sort of Westernish markets, like the UK, Canada, US, this is where these markets are more susceptible to kind of replacing essentially humans with more autonomous capabilities. So we're going to see more of that sort of penetration coming from these typically bigger markets. And then I think over time, probably it's going to take a decade or so, we're going to also see something like this coming into play in the more kind of trickier markets like Nordic and stuff like that. But I would argue it's inevitable, because from a kind of top level perspective, this will make your company significantly more profitable. So it would be kind of weird that you would not try and sort of introduce this in one way or the other. Doesn't matter which market you're in, because if your competitors are significantly more profitable than you are, you have a problem. And that problem typically, let's say for your software company, most of the expense is the headcount. So you need to really figure out ways how to make sure you're not hiring too many people. The best way probably to look at it is there's a lot of stuff, let's say on LinkedIn, etc., where a lot of companies are optimizing revenue per headcount essentially these days, right? And that's maybe another way to kind of think about it. How can we achieve more with the least possible headcount? And there's some amazing companies out there that have been able to achieve this. And if you're also listening to people like Sam Altman is saying, in the future, we may see a one single person company producing $1 billion in revenue, right? That may be a reality, right? If everything's fully autonomous and then the person sort of figures out how to get to this $1 billion revenue mark, where everything is fully autonomous and solving like a really big pain. Highly unlikely in my perspective, but you can definitely probably make $1 billion being a single person. It's just that all these AI capabilities, doesn't matter what it is in sales or other industries, make it possible essentially for you to do that.
Do you think you have like you mentioned there, like a decade in the Nordics versus you already know, like there's a lot of companies you see like in the US and other market that is already ramping this up. Like, do we have a chance in Europe with all the regulations and difficulties, like actually pulling this off versus the US?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing the AI regulations right kicking in, and we're gonna see how that's gonna evolve over time. It reminds me sort of, GDPR, right? So GDPR just was announced, and then it took like years to implement it. So I think it's gonna be similar. It's gonna be trickier, but I don't think AI will disappear, because yeah, it may sound crazy that EU is typically the first ones to introduce regulations, but the EU will say no to the AI money that it can generate, right? So it's just about playing along the rules that are being set for the companies. But I do believe that the US will also announce and will follow. So we've seen that with GDPR, right? You could see that in California, the companies, states are starting to introduce legislation also similar to the ones the Europeans are introducing. So we will see that in the US and also other markets, just a matter of time. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of new markets like Nordics and many others where they don't necessarily want to change the way they do things necessarily, yeah, it will take longer. But at the same time, I think the biggest impact that this sort of technology can make is in much, much bigger markets like US, for example, right? And UK and stuff like that. So there's less pressure potentially also in these smaller markets like Nordics to be implementing more AI capabilities.
They have niche products as well that not necessarily have a lot of like big competitors because it's a small market, like accounting tools and stuff like that, and it's so custom to a
Yeah.
specific market.
So what drives the adoption of AI is, a ton more competition ultimately, right? And you have that competition in those bigger markets like US, UK, where everybody's fighting, everybody's trying to figure out how to go up against your competitors. And ultimately, the more profitable you are, the more efficient you are, the more money you can spend in marketing and stuff like that, right? And that's where the pressure on applying AI, whether that's across sales, marketing, etc., just keeps on increasing further and further. So yeah.
But it gets even more interesting with this, with because you can actually, as you said, they're a one man $1 billion company. Like you could essentially, as a small company, with this potentially even the playing fields a little bit, I guess you could say, because I know for a fact like you are in the middle of all of this, right? Like building a kind of your whole little
We're an example
army
of that,
of
yes.
uh so let's say, because that would be a really interesting kind of a thought experiment, like because I guess this is alien for a lot of companies today, because there's such a mind shift you need to be doing here. Instead of like how can we hire more people, it's like how can we build system, how can we optimize systems around a few people, and give like it's it's the same but it's still not at all the same, right? So if you would do this, like let's say you're going in, it's a company, you have what you say, you can roam freely and do whatever you want and build up kind of what you think is the
Mhm.
future revenue organization. Like how would you approach that? Like what would be the kind of things you would be doing?
Yeah, so I think in the future we're going to see fewer people going into the sales orgs that are just straight out of university. Because typically this is how you start your career in sales. You stay out of university, you're looking for jobs, and then you end up in sales essentially in a lot of the cases, right? So not everybody is kind of optimizing the career for sales. They just kind of end up in sales one way or the other. Yes. So I used to work in in customer success actually back in a place called Black Row, where we used to sell machine learning. And back then the managing director in London said, "Listen, Frank, you're definitely not an account manager. You are a sales machine. You should definitely try out sales." And I was like, all right. I tried it for a quarter, and then with all the commission and stuff like that, I never looked back at being an account manager, because definitely in sales you earn a lot more than in account management. So anyway, that's a story aside. So I think, like I mentioned, so we're going to see fewer junior roles for very good reasons, because essentially you can increase the output of the more senior reps with the new technology and the new software that's available out in the market. And we're going to see. My take is I'm predicting we're going to see new type of a role in sales organizations called sales development engineers. So these engineers are the ones that are responsible to automate sales pipeline and essentially figure out ways of automate the hell out of it, and reducing headcount as much as possible. So how do you keep headcount low and increase output? This is sort of very similarly mimics to sales operations manager and or RevOps manager role, but I believe this is slightly different because the type of people that you need, for these sort of roles like sales development managers, they're a bit of a different breed. Um, they're more sort of growth hacky potentially. So maybe from the kind of growth marketing standpoint, that there's a lot of people that could go into this sort of role. But I do predict that we're gonna see fewer people, but with significantly more output. So there's already technologies where you can send essentially more emails per rep, which is what we do. For example, you can also do what's called parallel dialing multiple people at the same time. So there's a lot of tools out there, and something similar also exists on LinkedIn as well. So essentially, these sort of tools give you the ability to keep your headcount lean and mean, essentially. All of that needs to be managed, like all these automations, et cetera, et cetera. So whether that's the sales ops manager that does it, which is highly unlikely because I had quite a bit of experience with different sales operations managers, and they're not necessarily very what I would call growth hacky, or have a huge focus on the top of the funnel when it comes to automations, and the type of automations that I'm describing, right? How do you push output for the least possible headcount? It's also a very different kind of role. But some people would disagree with me. There's plenty of people that would disagree with me, where they would say that's the responsibility of RevOps function in any company. But under RevOps, I believe there will be, let's call it a new department that'll pop up called Sales Development Engineering. Um, yeah, and we'll see more of that definitely coming later in the year. And essentially, the junior people, essentially straight after university, they'll be ultimately working somewhere else. But this is not to say that this will also happen in every single segment, essentially, because autonomous capabilities are significantly more powerful when you are in high velocity sales, right? Where there's a lot of volume, very short sales cycles. Like, let's say in our case, our sales cycle is about a week, actually. So very, very short, right? That's where you're more prone to automating the hell out of it versus enterprise sales cycle anywhere between 6 to 12 months, maybe 18 months, etc. That's where you're more prone to having sort of humans managing all of that. And then, like I mentioned, there's also the markets, right? Some markets are more susceptible to automation, some are less so. So there will be definitely where we're going to see a lot of AI activity, and then another place we're going to see no AI activity whatsoever, because it all will be sort of people sort of still dominate it. But I'm a big believer that also those segments will eventually be pressured by investors to also change something about that. Um, and yeah, we will definitely probably in 10 years time also, segments like enterprise sales, etc., we will also see more sort of autonomous sales capabilities. But in the next sort of 2 to 5 years, it definitely will be the high velocity sales, where it's just too expensive to have salespeople or too many salespeople, but you still need to process these deals. You still need to do a bit of a lot of communication, maybe execution, etc. And that's where a lot of the AI capabilities come into play.
I mean, I would say like even for bigger organizations, like maybe it's on a different angle, but more like kind of data enrichment and kind of auto prospecting, because that's always a thing, right? Like finding the right people to actually get in touch with, not necessarily just to kind of actually contact them. And I think there's a lot of things there, especially for enterprise.
Yeah.
That
Actually, maybe on that note, maybe it's less about sort of, let's call it autonomous execution necessarily, but more on automation, just pure on automation, right?
mm,
Yeah, it's a bit of a, when you talk about AI and automation, for some people, it's the same thing, really. But yeah, we're definitely going to see, but not to an extent, arguably, as you would see in high velocity sales, where the need is just greater, essentially, to process essentially deals much faster, right? And provide a significantly better service. Whereas in enterprise sales, typically because you have such a high ticket, right? The deal sizes are massive. You can justify actually more so to spend on humans ultimately to ensure that these deals come to fruition.
mm.
So yeah, there's also financial justification more so in the enterprise sales, that why we have more headcount, or why we should have more, or less, or whatever. Whereas it's becoming trickier and trickier to have that headcount in high velocity sales due to things like inflation and the efficiencies of a typical SDR is just dropping over time because channels get saturated, like email, etc. Yeah, there's quite a few kind of problems that the existing model, what's called the predictable revenue model, currently faces these days. And it's fine. And I think the space itself is quite exciting because things change every sort of few years. And this is the year, and also including the last year, where we're going to see quite a few changes in the space on how you do business out there in B2B.
No, it's very like, so you mentioned there like the kind of, I guess, a little bit growth hacking engineer, like a technical growth hacker. Like would that be kind of the, because I could definitely see like if someone who's in pure operations, who maybe, I think having some kind of a sales background that you mentioned, who understand what to look for, how to do good discovery, so you can kind of build systems with that initial understanding. I would say like that's probably going to be essential, right? But you got to have that mindset, but you also need to have the tech savviness, which I think is quite rare. So it is probably hard for someone who is not, as you mentioned, not an A player, to actually tie all this in pieces together, because we normally see people who are good at one of them, but not who have the full package. That's quite rare.
Yeah, so you need to be, have a good acumen in sales, be somewhat analytical, know how to use no code or low code tools. So be hacky and kind of, also be very experimental, right? So you need to run a bunch of experiments. Not all things, typically go according to plan, and you need to be, in a mindset where you need to do a lot of conversion rate optimization, ultimately, what you would call in the world of marketing. So you'll need to do that also in the world of sales. As you're removing humans and sort of more automation kind of kicks in, you'll be doing a bunch of sort of A/B tests or multivariate tests to understand what works, what doesn't. So you need to be in that mindset of kind of pushing and squeezing out the maximum from the leads that you have, right? So you have. And this is a behavior that you're looking from, typically a type of a growth hacker, really, that's looking to hack growth and trying to figure out how do you scale very, very efficiently. But yeah, you need to have a sales background. This is where it becomes a bit tricky. Some people are, very, very heavy on analytics. Some people are more technical. Some people are more salesy. But actually having that combo, sales and analytical plus some sort of tech savviness as well in play, is very, very tricky to find people like that, especially in Europe, especially outside of the US or Canada. It's very, very difficult to find these people. I can tell you that I'm currently hiring a head of growth here for Salesforce, it's unbelievably difficult. I think for 300 applications that we've got, there's maybe about three about qualified candidates for the role. And it's not even a crazy role. It's just somebody who has experience working B2B SaaS and will look after the inbound, etc. And just even finding that for that particular candidate and fill that role is like super super tricky. And this also kind of shows that even the markets, just like in SaaS or technology in Europe, are still nowhere near mature to the markets in the US. And people just don't have the experience. So a lot of people work, whether that's in traditional B2B businesses, right? Or just B2C. And, you can't apply a lot of that to the way things work in B2B SaaS, which is very, very specific. And there's, these also, websites like G2, etc. You have to kind of understand how the whole ecosystem works a bit. So this is why, for example, for us, it's really hard to hire even head of growth. I can't even imagine if I would hire a sales development engineer. Like really, I think only about maybe 10 people come to mind from LinkedIn who could, that's around the world actually, that come to mind that could maybe fit this particular job description. So we don't even have talent, arguably, for these sort of roles. And I think the more demand kind of will kick in for these particular roles, the more sort of the labor workforce will sort of shift towards these more sophisticated roles, rather than kind of being an SDR and just doing a bit of cold calling, right? Or writing a bit of a few templates out there. So jobs will be more demanding, will require more skills, more competence, and I think that's good for everybody, just generally, right? So you don't want to be doing sort of a more sort of repetitive job. You want to be doing more kind of challenging job, right? As in kind of pushing yourself analytically and kind of pushing the boundaries. And that's why sales development engineer role in the future, I think, will be quite a kick-ass role to be in. So I think if I would be my younger days, that's maybe one of the roles that I would consider doing, because I do a lot of the kind of top of funnel activities here at Salesforce.
Yeah, I would say like I'm not like what you mentioned there, like with that kind of new challenges. I think a lot of people actually wouldn't like that. I think a
No,
lot of
why would you
people
think?
really like average and not doing a lot more than what's needed in their jobs. Like I think some people, like you mentioned the A players, like they definitely want that. But I think there's a big group of people that will kind of struggle in
Well,
this new structure.
I mean, that's where AI comes in, right? Is to eliminate in any organization, whether that's sales, finance, accounting, whatever, to eliminate the bottom performing essentially segment of employees in any organization. Look at IBM.
Yeah.
IBM is investing heavily in AI. Microsoft is investing. Everybody's investing. Everybody understands that there are huge chunks of labor workforce that are highly underperforming, and you can't do anything about it until AI comes in, right? And then suddenly AI is able to deliver the same output or more with fewer employees in mind, right? So we're definitely going to see that, whether you're a big or a small org. And I think you need to be prepared, and you kind of should think hard about your employability just long term, where you're going to be working. Because if AI is coming for you and for your job, you want to be thinking hard, how to not to be replaced.
I
So kind
think
of
it's yeah, sorry.
no, so there's plenty of roles where AI will never replace a human, but I highly, highly advise anybody that's listening to this to reconsider your career choices in the next 10 years, because AI is coming in marketing, sales, accounting, finance. It's coming across all the segments. So how do you want to defend yourself and be very highly employable? Because there will be potentially fewer jobs, right? Theoretically, right? Fewer jobs with higher demand when it comes to skills, right, and stuff like that. So, um, and yeah, and I'm not really sure what the juniors will do or where they will end up.
No, that's the thing, right? Like, so do you think like is this a death of the average employee?
Yep, probably
I
would
think
agree.
so. Yeah. So I guess that's a whole different question about like a different conversation. I would say like what might happen if that actually happened and who's going to buy the services and all that kind of stuff. But I think we stay out of that kind of very philosophical part of it, and instead because I've seen your calendar. I've seen you on LinkedIn. You're posting stuff there. Evidently, there is a lot of thing going on with Salesforce and like how you're growing. So it's Salesforce, not Salesforce. Um, what like so it would be really cool to hear like what like because you're a one man like a
Machine.
hyper sales machine thing, who is right now not in a spaceship, but you were last time we spoke. Like what, like how are you approaching this? Because you are like doing a lot of cool stuff, and I think that would be very interesting to hear. Like, how have you designed your own, what you can share without kind of spelling the secret sauce?
Sure. So I can say that we got to seven figures in revenue um, without a single additional employee in go-to-market function. So that's just me, and there's just engineers and tech people. That's all. So, and we don't do just PLG motion. PLG meaning product-led growth motion. We combine what we call sales-led growth with product-led growth very efficiently. And yes, arguably we move very fast. Just to give an idea, every month this year, I had over 200 client meetings per month. We grew in Q1 over 1,200% in monthly recurring revenue. So yeah, growing very, very fast. We're very, very lean and very, very mean. Right? This is exactly what we're looking to replicate amongst the clients, that we're working with. And that's how we're designing the software. We're designing the software in mind where we want to make every single organization as lean, as mean as possible from day zero. From the moment that you're building out your MVP to getting the initial traction, then kind of keep on scaling. We want to be the software of choice for the most efficient company that you could be running in B2B. And yeah, so my kind of daily day works. Day looks like where you have typically anywhere between 10 to 20 meetings. I think today I have 15. One of them is just jumping on a pod with you, as an example. So there's a bunch of meetings after this pod as well. And yeah, you kind of end up working really 7 days a week, and you have to be kind of, are you in for the ride or not? Because the business grows so fast. Yes, you work 7 days a week. You take maybe a day or two off once a year, but you just keep doing the grind, right? And I can tell you, a lot of founders just give up very early because they're not used to the speed. And I'm the guy that loves speed. And the more customer conversations I have, the more dopamine hit I get, and just keeps me kind of driving forwards, essentially. And yeah, you need to take care of support, kind of custom onboarding, etc. So this is where the tech support team comes in, engineers come in, right? So they do support our clients while I'm chatting to you, with you, for example. And yeah, we got also to seven figures just with 4 people, actually. So not a big team whatsoever, but we will be doubling the team as in Q2 as we progress into the quarter. And yeah, so you have to kind of figure out, how do you become efficient kind of from day zero. And there's a lot that goes into that, and we could be probably speaking for hours. If anybody is a founder and listening in, just ping me if you're struggling kind of on day zero, even before day zero potentially. But just to give you an idea, what did we do back in the early days before even Salesforce existed? We took actually orders from our users where we didn't even write a single line of code. We wrote no single line of code. We went and spoke to users and asked a few of them, would you be willing to pull out your credit card and pay for something like this that does not even exist yet? Right. So we're very kind of, maybe it's not the right word, aggressive, but we're definitely sort of poking the bear and saying, hey, would you pay for this? We're definitely very good at asking those questions in sales. And we've been doing that as we progressed. And so we've done that with Salesforce. Then we released another product actually after 6 months called Mailforce.ai. Mailforce allows you to provision the infrastructure that's required in Outbound. And same thing with Mailforce. We acquired 50 customers before we released the app and the website. So we had 50 customers before there was a website, a UI to log in. There was just trust between essentially the user and us, right? So building that rapport quickly, effectively, and taking the money for something that sort of does not even exist on the internet is quite an exercise. But you need to be doing this, along the way as you're growing. And typically in the early days, you do things that don't scale. So you can read up online, what does that mean, doing things that don't scale, but you're going to be doing a lot of that. And then later you need to figure out the system, essentially. Which of the channels sort of predictably deliver revenue or monthly recurring revenue, right in our case, to your business, and you can do that very, very efficiently and very, very profitably. So that's where Salesforce, for example, comes in. We eat our own dog food. We use our own software. We reach out to users. We send great emails in different languages. We show what we do. People get excited. People jump on the call with us, and then we show the product and we sell it. It's kind of no-brainer for a lot of people if you explain the way that the software works, etc. And then you need to at least focus on one channel. So that could be, for example, cold email as an example. If you crack cold email, just keep on doing it. The question becomes, is it scalable? Do you have enough time to go after? No case, that's a yes. So you need to at least focus on one channel, just one, until $1 million in ARR. And then once you unlock the $1 million ARR mark, then you can start expanding, going to channel 2, 3, 4, maybe it's too much, about 2 more at least channels that are also very scalable. So for other businesses, that could be, for example, SEO, though SEO takes time. So typically I would say, okay, if you're a B2B startup founder and you're just starting a company, you have a great product and you're solving a great pain, there's only really 3 ways that you can scale a business very fast. So one of them is what we do. Cold email, that's one. Number 2 is what's called cold calling at scale. We don't do that, but there's a bunch of softwares out there. Highly recommend exploring that. So, however, you have to be trained in sales, right? So picking up the phone, calling people, getting through gatekeepers, and getting on the phone with the decision makers, stuff like that. You have to be trained for that. So for a lot of people, a lot of startup founders actually are not trained. This is why they're either doing the option 1, meaning the cold emailing, or the final option, which is advertising. Advertising, you spend millions and millions of dollars with Google ads, Facebook ads, etc. But a lot of that money will go down the drain, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And actually, Google and Facebook, they're like, a slot machine, essentially. You just keep chucking more cash into this and hope for the best, right? So maybe not necessarily the most what I call cost-effective way of acquiring clients. So typically, arguably, cold email is the most cost-effective acquiring clients, which is the reason why we've been that successful. And the second one, I would do cold calling. If I had time for this, I would definitely do cold calling. However, I am hiring a rep to do cold calling. So that's a channel that we still don't do yet, but we will unlock that channel. But besides doing cold emailing as our primary channel, what else can we do, right? So typically, one of the kind of powerful things you kind of have to figure out for yourself is like, where's your ICP? So your ideal customer. Is your ideal customer in Facebook or Insta, TikTok? Is it on LinkedIn? Where are they, right? Because you want to mingle with them. And because we sell to startup founders and to salespeople, then naturally what happens is a lot of them are on LinkedIn. Whatever they're doing, whether they're selling, right, whether they're just spying on the competitors, which is what we do, right? We just spy on competitors time to time, check out what they do. So we have them always in the radar. Et cetera, et cetera. So because our ICP is on LinkedIn, we spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, or I spend, right? So it's nobody else. The engineers don't want to jump on LinkedIn. I kind of force them to, sometimes comment maybe or repost the LinkedIn post, etc. But you definitely want to connect with a lot of your ICP. So if salespeople is your ICP or your startup founders, connect with them. Don't aggressively sell to them. Do not automate on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a relationship or network-based game, right? You connect with a lot of people. You do what's called social selling, right? You tell them exactly how your product works. You do building in the public, essentially. You walk them through all the pains that you're facing as a startup founder, etc. And you communicate as frequently as you can, but ultimately provide value or do what I typically call edutainment. Edutainment means education plus entertainment. That's called edutainment. So you also entertain your audience because you want to, a person wants to learn something, but also wants to have fun along the way while they're learning that, right? So not going to go too deep into that, but kind of keep it funny. Well, it really depends on the audience, right? And the kind of niche you're going in. But kind of think about it really, how you present your information. But typically 2 things that I like doing is talk about my journey as a startup founder, and then talk about how our product could potentially solve a lot of the problems, or just talk about problems without talking about the product, right? And I'm typically a big believer to amplifying the pain as much as you can, whether that's in cold email, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc., which is another kind of a growth area that we're going to be exploring later this year. And double down and educate the market why, for example, email deliverability, why email deliverability needs to be solved, that your email's landing span, or why AI needs to be used, right? Because it's just, it's not anymore growth at all costs. So all of these things is something that you need to educate your audience, and they're going to start trusting you more and more. And then once you reach out to them, then maybe later on LinkedIn or via cold email, they'll be like, "Oh, Frank, I've seen some of your stuff on LinkedIn. It's like really good. I've been one of your webinars, and I've seen you on the pod, etc." Like, and then they trust you more. They can resonate with you, and they're like, "Yeah, Frank's the guy for the AI stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna talk to him. It's fine. I think he's a good guy. Never talk to him, but it's much easier as well for you to sell, right? Because they know you, they heard somewhere about you." And then what happens is there's also what's called the dark social. People start sharing in the Slack community, in WhatsApp groups, etc. I'm in a lot of WhatsApp groups, by the way, and also Slack communities. Probably about, I don't know, like 50 Slack communities. I'm in 10 WhatsApp groups with different people with my SCPs. Also Facebook groups, Reddit. We're on TikTok as well. We're everywhere. So, and you kind of need to, a bit of everything and understand what works, what doesn't. So we do a lot of testing, essentially try and figure out, where do we see the traction, where do we see the pull from the market, and then we just double down. When we see something that works, or where we get, for example, our biggest accounts, then we're like, okay, that's the channel. That's the channel that we're going to focus. Let's do 10x or maybe 100x of what we did last quarter and see whether that will move the needle significantly, right? So that's where we're trying to get to these signals, what works, what doesn't. And if something works, we just 10x or 100x. So that's how I think about kind of growth. And then everything where I'm seeing, okay, this is not working, I just kill it as quickly as possible and just only work on what works. So I always say, in marketing in particular, the best way of focusing yourself is, first of all, you need to defocus. Defocus from the stuff that kind of doesn't work or it's too difficult, whatever. Focus on the stuff that works really well. People love your product in that particular channel. Just keep doing more of that, right? So, for example, LinkedIn. We just, the more we post on LinkedIn, the more leads we get. As simple as that. So, yeah, so that's why I'm going to do more of LinkedIn. We're going to do more of YouTube. We're going to do more cold emailing. Cold calling is going to come as well, but we're going to do a lot of that, but with a very, very lean headcount. So because we don't believe in a huge headcount, unless it's something like, engineering, for example, because typically the more code we ship, the more money we make. And same with tech support. So typically the better the support we have, that's how we kill our competition, really. We have a lot of people transitioning over to us because they said that our top competitors, we have quite a few of them, but our top competitors, their support is really crap. And then when they come to us, it feels like they're speaking to real professionals versus like, what you typically would expect to support people, sending you a template, whatever, just to get rid of you. No, in our case, that's not how it works. We don't send templates to get rid of our users. We actually try and like genuinely help, right? Sometimes they come for tech support. Sometimes they come for a sales particular question, and we will do our best to answer that. And if we don't know, or we will say we don't know, or if we believe, for example, a competitor is a significantly better solution for their needs right now, we will say that transparently because we know they'll come back. And so, a lot of these things, is super important. So this is where maybe final thought here is that at the end of the day, from the day zero journey, people don't just subscribe to the software, they also subscribe to the team that's behind the software. And I always say that, check out these individuals on LinkedIn, check out their background. Which of the teams do you believe will move the needle for you the furthest, right? And I think we have quite good chances. So quite excited for what is that we're building and supporting thousands of businesses out there already these days. And we're just going to 10x that by next year quite easily because we're just going to do more of what works and then significantly less of what doesn't, essentially. So,
Yeah, no, I think that I definitely agree with what you said there. With like focusing on less kind of things and fewer channels. But I think so many companies, they're afraid of actually picking a few battles and doing that really well. But if it's really working well, why wouldn't you want to do more of that versus doing the kind of stuff that's not working? But I think for so many, it's like we just do it just to be sure, but then we do a little bit of everything. And I think it's just the default that everyone is turning to. And I think like flipping that script a little bit, what you mentioned here, I think it's if you dare to do that and know your ICP, what you mentioned as well, know who you're focusing on. I think that's a pretty good position to be in for a lot. But final thing before we kind of transition here, because like just to be clear with your product, right? Like it's like because everyone right now is getting a ton of kind of mail merging spam. hi first name, and that's kind of some fake personalization. It gets hit into the spam box. Like, what are you guys like doing differently there in terms of like kind of your approach to this that is kind of like working versus the, because I've always made like outbound work, but because you're more personal than like the kind of typical spammer.
Yeah, so I think it's not about more, but it's about smarter acquisition ultimately, right? So this is where, on one hand, you have to focus and kind of really nail down the message that you're sending to your prospects, and not just to a persona, but actually to each and one of them, right? And essentially, we call that um, programmatic sequencing, right? Because typically you still sequence, you engage, and you send multiple, there's multiple touch points with the prospect. That's why it's a sequencing. So whether you send, 2 or 3 emails and then you follow via LinkedIn or do a cold call, right? That's what's called a sequence. So it's a sequence that you're executing in a particular software. Now, these sequences are very static. So typically, yeah, a bunch of templates have been sent, and maybe something that looks like it's a personalized email is not really personalized. It's a buyer persona, maybe specific template where there's maybe dynamic variable that has been changed, like company name, first name, and maybe a few other things. But we're moving towards a world where every single email can be custom personalized to that particular individual using publicly available information, whether that's their website, LinkedIn profile, financial reports, and many other things. So essentially leveraging multiple sources, which is what we do, including CRM data, potentially, what has been happening in the past with that particular lead. So we will see more sophisticated, ultimately smarter systems that will be, either executed by the human or will be autonomously executed. My argument is that autonomous execution is significantly more powerful, because one of the biggest problems of why companies, just don't make more money is because there's a human in the equation. So this is, again, not to say, that across all the segments, but typically from what I've seen, and I worked in sales for over a decade, also led a sales team of over 50 people, you would see that if we would eliminate the human, and if the system would work itself towards a particular target, whether that you're using Gen AI, whether you're using machine learning models, etc., you will see significantly more output, right, from the leads. And yeah, so yeah, that's the sort of, the direction that sort of the world is moving. So yeah.
Awesome. Let's end it there, Frank. So thank you so much for your time. So just a final kind of a little bit more philosophical question that we usually end with. So kind of what's one kind of learning or insight that had a big impact on your personal and or professional life?
Um,
You can't
insights.
say AI or something like that. It got to be something else.
Yeah, so AI. So when it comes to AI, I'm just, trying to use AI to replace myself. Ultimately, that's what I'm really. That's my personal mission, really, right now. And I think the insight, it does come from, partially from AI. There's one insight. What can AI do, really? And I've seen a lot of that insight in the world of marketing, and I'm just bringing that into the world of sales right now. But I think, just generally the insight is that having humans doing any form of optimization, whether that's in sales, marketing, etc., means you're not maximizing the efficiencies. And you can look at companies like Google or Facebook, right, that use a ton of machine learning models and Gen AI as part of their bidding, or right, or their products. Same in Facebook, right? These are very, very powerful models, right? And we are seeing essentially none of that in the world of sales. Still, people use majority of the time just rules based execution, right? Send an email on this day, do that, etc. There's no machine learning involved whatsoever. Gen AI just starts to, becoming more and more popular, but we're just still in its infancy in terms of what's possible. So I think one of the insights is that, uh, for me, generally, what I the reason why I kind of started, building Salesforce is because I saw how bloated my own team was previously, working as a VP sales, a team of 50, and this is where I was like, damn, all the software that's in the market, it's all optimizing towards as having as many bums on the seats as possible, not being on the other side of the coin, meaning helping companies to reduce headcount actually and being more profitable. And that's where I was like very, very annoyed, which is the reason why I started to build Salesforce together with my two co-founders.
Probably the per seat pricing as well, right? Like they have per seat pricing, so they want a big headcount.
Yes, that's how they make the money. Whereas we don't charge per seat. We give unlimited seats. We charge for the consumption, which is what makes sense. The whole world of sort of software, AI, etc., is all moving towards consumption-based pricing. So I believe seat-based pricing will die because, well, how are you looking to make money anyway? Like if you're looking to reduce headcount, right? It kind of doesn't make sense. But guess what? The softwares that actually have consumption-based pricing, they'll actually make a lot more money because as you ultimately, let's say, either replace humans or empower them, doesn't matter. But with consumption-based pricing, that means typically companies will pay you a lot actually to support your organization, right? So there'll be a lot of sort of usage from that software. So those softwares that have consumption-based pricing, they will make a ton of more money actually than seat-based pricing, which relies on humans operating the software, right? The more autonomous also capabilities that software will have as well, right? So the software will be able to charge a lot more, right? Because they're delivering a lot more value. They're replacing humans, and you as a software, you'll be benchmarked against salaries and headcount, which is much easier to justify. We all know how expensive people are these days. So yeah, the insight is just for anybody is try and figure out, how, I mean, just like I was speaking in the beginning, how can you make specific departments, organizations significantly more leaner and meaner? And that's what all the companies will be drawn to. They all try to figure out the CFOs, the CEOs, the boards, the investors, VCs, all of them, right? They try, we live in a capitalist society, right? Um, Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. You know how they say. So, so your job as as a software, like are you moving the needle? And the best way is kind of to move the needle. I'm just looking at all the companies is the human component, right? So, how do you help companies to reduce that? And that's really needle moving for a lot of companies because you can save them a ton of money there. So yeah, that's my
Awesome.
final thought.
Awesome. So Frank, where can people go to find out about me? For find out more about you? Like
LinkedIn, of course.
LinkedIn, you're
Yes.
YouTuber as well. I know there's some
Yes,
YouTube action coming
there's
out.
YouTube. There's a few Frank's hacks that I post on there. There's a specific playlist. I'm gonna post all my hacks. So I just started last month, so it's
Oh,
fresh. It
nice.
only has 4 videos, but all the hacks, everything that I learned about growing a startup, I'll be posting on there. But yeah, if you got any questions about outbound, how to crush your competitors, if you have too many competitors, come speak to me. I love competitors. I love many competitors. I love competing against competitors. I always play friendly as well with competitors, so we speak to a lot of our competitors as well. So anything on competitor front, founding, leading sales teams, really happy to help on that. That's where I excel. And there's a bunch of also things that I don't excel in. So, so don't reach out about things like that. I really hate like admin, accounting, and stuff like that. Typically, salespeople hate that. So, yeah. So find me on LinkedIn. Check out the website if you're interested in outbound. Check out YouTube channel, and then yeah, I shall see you around.
Awesome. So Frank, thank you so much for taking the time today. And yeah, we'll be posting some links as well in the podcast and also on YouTube, so people can go find you there. So yeah, looking forward to following your growth journey.
Thanks, guys.